The silence of the first-class cabin was thick, punctuated only by the polite murmur of pre-flight service. 17-year-old Elijah kept his head down, his pencil scratching lightly over the fine-grained paper of his sketchbook. He felt the stare before he saw it, a heavy, acidic glare from the woman across the aisle. She hissed something to her husband, the words affirmative action and standards cutting through the quiet. Elijah sighed, refusing to look up. But the woman, Brenda, wasn't done. "How dare you!" she suddenly shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. Before Elijah could react, a cold, sticky torrent of orange juice slammed into his chest, the cup hitting the floor. The cabin gasped, and just as the first tear of humiliation stung Elijah's eye, the final passenger stepped on board, a tall, powerful man in a tailored suit who stopped dead, his face hardening into glacial fury. "Elijah," the man said. "Dad," the boy whispered. The Ascend Airlines flagship lounge at JFK Terminal 8 was an oasis of curated calm. Soft, ambient classical music drifted from unseen speakers, mixing with the gentle clinking of porcelain and the hiss of the espresso machine. It smelled of expensive leather and subtle, lemon-tinged cleaning polish. 17-year-old Elijah Kingsley felt perfectly at home, yet constantly watched. He sat in a plush, high-backed armchair, his long legs folded, a worn leather sketchbook open on his lap. He wasn't sketching people, he was sketching propulsion. His pencil lines were confident and precise, detailing the theoretical mechanics of a next-generation turbine engine. He was on his way to London, not for vacation, but for a coveted summer internship with the engineering team at Ascend's Heathrow hub. It was his passion. He'd been here for an hour, his father, Marcus, having been pulled into a last-minute operational meeting near the gate. "Order whatever you want, son. I'll be there before boarding," Marcus had said, clapping him on the shoulder. Elijah was fine with it. The quiet gave him time to think. The calm was fractured by the arrival of a couple in their late 50s. The woman, Brenda Reynolds, wore a bright turquoise tracksuit that seemed aggressively loud in the muted tones of the lounge. Her hair was a stiff, platinum blonde helmet. Her husband, Richard, was paunchy and damp-looking in a wrinkled polo shirt, clutching his phone like a lifeline. Brenda surveyed the lounge with a look of profound disappointment, as if she'd been promised a palace and delivered a bus station. Her eyes scanned the occupants, a senator reading the Wall Street Journal, a quiet family in the corner, and finally, Elijah. Her eyes snagged on him. She saw a black teenager, dressed in comfortable, high-end streetwear and expensive headphones, sitting alone in the most exclusive part of the airport. Her upper lip curled. "Richard, look at this," she said, her voice a piercing whisper designed to carry. "They're just letting children in here now? Unaccompanied? What is this? A daycare?" Richard, absorbed in his phone, grunted. "He's probably with someone, dear. Just find a seat." "I don't care," Brenda pressed on, louder. "It lowers the tone. People pay thousands for this privilege, not to be surrounded by this." Elijah heard every word. He'd been trained his whole life for moments like this. "Don't engage. Don't escalate. Be better." He simply pulled his headphones down over his ears, though he didn't turn on the music. He could still hear her sharp voice cutting through. They settled in the alcove directly across from him. Brenda made a production of wiping down the pristine leather seat with a sanitary wipe before sitting, her expression one of deep offense. She stared at Elijah openly, a hostile, judgmental glare. He refused to meet her gaze, focusing on the complex geometry of his engine sketch. This only seemed to anger her more. She saw his focus as insolence, his presence as a personal affront. The gate agent's voice finally chimed over the speaker, announcing the boarding of Flight 112 to London Heathrow, starting with first class. Elijah packed his sketchbook and pen into his sleek, graphite-coloured backpack, stood up and stretched. He was tall, over 6 feet, and moved with the easy grace of an athlete. He joined the short queue at the lounge's private gate. Brenda and Richard got in line directly behind him. Brenda was now huffing impatiently. When the gate agent smiled at Elijah and scanned his pass, Brenda pushed forward. "Excuse me," Brenda snapped at the agent. "I think you'll find we are in first class. This young man must be in the wrong line." The agent, a polite woman named Chloe, didn't blink. "He is in the correct line, ma'am. He's in seat 1A. Brenda looked staggered. 1? That's impossible." She looked at Elijah as if he'd just confessed to a crime. "How did you get 1A? Elijah met her gaze for the first time. His eyes were calm, intelligent, and weary. "The same way you did, ma'am. I have a ticket." He turned and walked down the jet bridge, the insulated corridor muffling the sounds of the active tarmac. He could hear Brenda right behind him, muttering to Richard, "It's absurd. His parents probably work for the ground crew, using a buddy pass. They shouldn't be allowed in the premium cabin. It's not fair to the rest of us." Elijah stepped onto the Boeing 787. The atmosphere inside was hushed. He was greeted by Sarah, the lead flight attendant, whose smile was warm and genuine. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Kingsley. 1A is right here to your left. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? We have champagne, water, or fresh orange juice." "Orange juice would be great, thank you," Elijah said, skillfully sliding his backpack into the overhead bin and settling into the spacious, suite-like seat. This was his favorite part of the plane, the front left corner. He felt the hum of the aircraft thrumming through the floor, a promise of takeoff. Moments later, Brenda and Richard arrived. When Brenda saw Elijah already settled in 1A, her face soured completely. Their seats were 1C and 1D, in the center block across the aisle. "Richard, I cannot believe this," she snapped, shoving her rollerboard bag at him to stow. "The very front seat. It's a joke." Richard just wanted to sit down. "Brenda, please, let it go. It doesn't affect us." "It does affect us. It's about standards," she hissed. Sarah, the flight attendant, approached them. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds. A pre-departure beverage for you." "Champagne, and make it quick," Brenda snapped. Sarah's professional smile didn't waver. "Of course. And for you, sir?" "Just water," Richard muttered, already sinking into his phone's glow. Elijah put his headphones on, this time for real, and closed his eyes, trying to block out the woman's toxic energy. He just wanted to get to London. He wanted to see his dad. The plane was nearly full, but the seat next to him, 1B, remained conspicuously empty. He knew it was his father's. The final boarding call was being made, and Marcus still wasn't here. Elijah felt a small pang of anxiety. His dad never missed a flight. The minutes ticked by. The cabin door was still open, but the flow of passengers had stopped. The ground crew was making final preparations. Elijah checked his phone. No new messages from his dad. He resisted the urge to call, knowing his father was likely just finishing his meeting. Sarah returned with Brenda's champagne, handling the glass flute with practiced elegance. "Here you are, Mrs. Reynolds." Brenda snatched the glass. "It's about time." She took a large, unladylike gulp, her eyes immediately darting back to Elijah. He was just sitting there, existing, and it was driving her insane. "He's probably one of those scholarship kids," she loudly whispered to Richard, who was pretending to read a financial report. "These companies are forced to do all this. Outreach. They give away seats that people like us have to pay for. It's reverse discrimination. That's what it is." Elijah heard her. He couldn't not hear her. He opened his eyes and looked directly at her. He didn't say anything, just held her gaze with a neutrality that she found infuriating. She expected anger or shame or defiance. She did not expect indifference. "Can I help you?" Brenda snapped, her voice rising. "No, Mum," Elijah said, his voice polite and low. "I was just wondering if you could please keep your voice down." The mask of civility fell from Brenda's face. "Keep my voice down? In a cabin I paid for. You've got some nerve, boy. You're probably just happy to be out of coach." "Brenda," Richard warned, his eyes flicking nervously toward Sarah, who was at the front galley organizing menus. "Don't Brenda me, Richard. I'm tired of it. I work hard, we work hard, and we have to sit here and watch our world be given away to people who haven't earned it." "Mum," Elijah said, his patience finally fraying, "you don't know anything about me. I've earned my place here just as much as you have." "Oh, I doubt that," she sneered. "What did you earn? A diversity quota? A handout? I know your type. You think the world owes you something." This was the moment Elijah could escalate. He could tell her who his father was. He could list his own achievements, his 4.0 GPA, his early acceptance to MIT's aerospace program, his award-winning science fair projects. But he knew it wouldn't matter. A woman like this didn't listen to facts. She listened only to her own prejudice. So he did what his father had always taught him. He met hate with dignity. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mum," Elijah said, his voice cool and clear. "I'm just going to enjoy my flight. I hope you can do the same." He turned away from her, a gesture of finality, and picked up his sketchbook. This, for Brenda, was the ultimate insult. His dismissal, his calm, his refusal to be baited into a fight he would supposedly lose. It was a rejection of her perceived superiority. She was vibrating with a petty, spiteful rage. Across the cabin, in seat 2G, a businessman named Mr. Henderson watched the exchange over the top of his glasses. He was disgusted by the woman's behavior and impressed by the young man's restraint. Sarah, the flight attendant, had also heard the escalation. She stepped forward, her expression one of professional concern. "Is everything all right here, Mum?" Brenda turned her fury on Sarah. "No, it's not all right. This passenger is being rude to me. He's behaving in a threatening manner." This was a blatant, dangerous lie. Sarah looked at Elijah, who was just holding his sketchbook, his face a mask of disbelief. "Ma'am, he's just sitting in his seat," Sarah said calmly. "He's smirking at me," Brenda shrieked. "He's making me uncomfortable. I want him moved. Put him in the back where he belongs." Now the entire first-class cabin was staring. Richard looked mortified. "Brenda, stop it. You're making a scene." "I don't care. I want him moved." Elijah finally spoke up, his voice hard. "I'm not moving anywhere. This is my seat. You are harassing me. Please leave me alone." "Harassing you?" Brenda laughed, a short, ugly bark. "You don't even know what harassment is. You're just a kid who's been told yes his whole life by bleeding-heart liberals. You wouldn't last a day in the real world." Sarah stepped between them, holding a hand up gently toward Brenda. "Mom, I'm going to have to ask you to please calm down. We are preparing for departure. Your behavior is disturbing the other passengers." "He's disturbing me." "Mom, if you cannot lower your voice and remain in your seat, I will have to notify the captain. We have a zero-tolerance policy for passenger interference." Brenda looked at Sarah with contempt. "Are you threatening me? You, a waitress in the sky? Do you know who my husband is? He spends more on this airline in a month than you make in a year. He could have your job." Sarah, though intimidated, stood her ground. "That is irrelevant, Mom. Please, sit down." Brenda looked like she was about to explode. Her face was a blotchy, furious red. Richard was tugging on her arm, whispering, "Brenda, Brenda, stop, don't." The deal. But Brenda was too far gone. She was blinded by a rage that had been simmering for years, a deep-seated poison that Elijah's mere presence had uncorked. She looked at Elijah, who was watching her with a mixture of pity and disgust, and that was the final straw. "I'm not going to be looked at like that," Brenda seethed, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous snarl. "Not by the likes of you." She still had her orange juice in her hand. Sarah had just delivered it to Elijah moments before the confrontation began. It sat on the polished wood console beside his seat, condensation beading on the glass. Brenda, however, was still nursing her second glass of champagne. No, that wasn't right. The orange juice was Elijah's. Sarah had just placed it on his console. Let's rewind the moment for clarity. Sarah had delivered Elijah's orange juice. "Here you are, Mr. Kingsley." "Thank you, Sarah," he'd said, smiling. Brenda had watched this polite exchange, and it was like gasoline on a fire. The civility, the respect he was being shown, that was when she escalated. That was when she demanded he be moved. When Sarah blocked her and Elijah told her to leave him alone, Brenda looked at the bright orange, pulpy liquid sitting on his console. She looked at his clean, white t-shirt. She looked at his calm, dark face. And she snapped. "You're a disgrace!" She spat. Before Sarah could react, before Richard could grab her arm, before Elijah could even flinch, Brenda seized the glass of orange juice from Elijah's console. It was a full 12-ounce glass. "You need to learn some respect," she shrieked, and with a vicious, sideways flick of her wrist, she threw the entire contents of the glass directly at Elijah. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. The cold, sticky liquid hit him square in the chest and face. Droplets exploded outwards, splattering the cream-colored suede of the suite's wall, his sketchbook, and the empty seat beside him. A collective, horrified gasp echoed through the cabin. Elijah froze, stunned. The cold juice soaked through his shirt instantly, sticking to his skin. Pulp was clinging to his cheek and dripping from his chin. For a split second, the only sound was the drip, drip, drip of orange juice onto the plush carpet. Brenda stood there, panting, her arm still half extended, her face alight with triumphant malice. "There," she said, her voice shaking. "Maybe that'll cool you off." Elijah just stared at her. The humiliation was a hot, physical blow, sharper than the cold of the drink. He could feel all the eyes on him. The other passengers, the flight attendants. Sarah was the first to move. "Mom, you assaulted him!" she cried, her professionalism shattering in the face of such a blatant attack. She grabbed a handful of napkins and rushed to Elijah. "Mr. Kingsley, Elijah, are you okay?" "Oh my goodness." Elijah couldn't speak. He just took the napkins, his hands shaking slightly as he wiped the juice from his eyes. His sketchbook was ruined. The pages were warped and stained. "Brenda, my God!" Richard Reynolds finally bellowed, his face ashen. He wasn't angry at what she'd done. He was terrified of the consequences. "What did you do?" "I did what needed to be done," Brenda shot back, though a flicker of fear was now entering her eyes. She had crossed a line, and she knew it. He insulted me. "He did no such thing," a voice boomed from across the cabin. It was Mr. Henderson, the businessman in 2G. He was on his feet, his face crimson with anger. "I saw the whole thing. You have been harassing that young man since you boarded. I am a witness. That was assault, plain and simple." "Sir, please sit down," another flight attendant called out. "I will not sit down," Henderson retorted. "This is a disgrace." Sarah was already on the internal phone to the cockpit, her voice low and urgent. "Captain Miller, this is Sarah, in first. We have a level 2 incident. A passenger in 1C has physically assaulted a passenger in 1A. Yes, sir. Through a full drink. Yes, sir. We need security at the gate. Immediately." Brenda heard this. "Security? You're calling security? On me?" The bravado was cracking, replaced by a shrill panic. "Richard, do something! Tell them who you are!" Richard stood up, his hands fluttering nervously. "Now hold on. Let's not overreact. My wife, she's a nervous flyer. She didn't mean it. It was an accident. Her hand slipped." "Her hand slipped?" Elijah said, his voice quiet, but vibrating with a cold fury he hadn't known he possessed. He stood up, the orange juice dripping from his clothes onto the floor. She looked right at me. She threw it right in my face. "You call that an accident?" "Now listen here, young man," Richard tried, attempting a blustering, authoritative tone. "I'm sure we can sort this out. A simple misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," Sarah snapped, her patience gone. She was now in protective mode. "It was an unprovoked assault on a minor. You need to sit down, Mr. Reynolds, or you will be removed as well." "You can't remove us," Brenda shrieked. "We're Platinum members. We have a cruise to catch. This is our vacation." The argument was reaching a fever pitch. The cabin was in chaos, and it was into this exact moment of chaos that the final passenger stepped on board. He was a tall man in his late 40s, impeccably dressed in a dark, custom-tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair cut short and neat. He moved with an air of absolute, unshakable authority. He had been on his phone on the jet bridge, finalizing a maintenance dispatch. He'd hung up, apologized to the gate agent for the delay, and stepped onto the plane. He stopped dead. The first thing he saw was the chaos. He saw Sarah, his best lead attendant, looking frantic. He saw passengers on their feet. He saw Richard and Brenda Reynolds, their faces twisted in argument. And then he saw his son, standing in the aisle, soaked from head to toe in orange juice, his face a mask of profound humiliation and anger. The man's face, which had been set in a neutral professional expression, hardened into something that chilled the air around him. His presence was so commanding that the arguments died instantly. He dropped his briefcase. "Elijah," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "What happened?" Elijah looked at his father. The relief and the anger and the humiliation all swelled up at once. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Dad, she threw her drink on me." Brenda, seeing this well-dressed black man, didn't understand. She saw him only as another obstacle. "Oh, great," she sneered, her panic making her even more vicious. "Is this your father? Is he going to complain too? What are you going to do? Are you going to pay for the dry cleaning? This thug of a son of yours insulted me. He's lucky all he got was juice." Marcus Kingsley, CEO and president of Ascend Airlines, slowly turned his head. He didn't look at his son. He didn't look at the flight attendant. He looked directly at Brenda Reynolds, and his eyes were as cold and dead as a winter sky. The shift in the cabin was palpable. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. The air had been sucked out. Sarah, the flight attendant, saw Marcus, and her blood ran cold. She had been with the company for 15 years. She knew exactly who this was. Mr. Kingsley," she stammered, her hand flying to her chest. "Sir, there was an incident. I've called for security." Brenda and Richard heard the name. "Kingsley," Brenda scoffed, still not processing. "Who are you?" Richard, however, had gone pale. He was a businessman. He followed corporate news. He knew the airline industry because his own company, Innovatech Solutions, was actively bidding on a massive 9-figure contract with Ascend Airlines. He'd seen the man's face in financial reports and industry keynotes. "Brenda." "Shut up," Richard whispered, his voice trembling. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in. "Don't tell me to—" "Shut up," he hissed, his eyes wide with terror. That is Marcus Kingsley." Brenda's brain finally made the connection. Marcus Kingsley, the CEO, the man who owned the airline she was standing on, and the boy he had called Elijah, the boy she had just assaulted. "Elijah," Marcus said again, his voice never rising, yet it cut through the entire cabin. He walked forward, stepping past Brenda as if she were a piece of furniture, and stood in front of his son. He gently put his hands on Elijah's shoulders, his eyes scanning him, not as a CEO checking on a passenger, but as a father checking for wounds. "Are you hurt?" "No, Dad, I'm sticky," Elijah said, a shaky laugh escaping him. "And my sketchbook is ruined." "It's just paper, son. We'll get you another one." Marcus's hands gently tilted his son's chin up, wiping a stray piece of pulp from his temple with his thumb. "You handled this." "I tried to," Elijah said, his voice small. I didn't say anything bad, Dad. I promise." "I know you didn't," Marcus said. His voice was warm for his son, and for his son only. "You have more grace than I ever did." He turned, and the warmth vanished, replaced by a controlled, glacial fury that was far more terrifying than any yelling. He looked at Sarah. "Sarah, you are the lead on this flight?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Kingsley." "Please, get Elijah a first-class comfort kit. There should be a fresh sweatsuit in there. Let him use the forward lavatory to change. And please, take his suit. I want it sent to our executive cleaners in London, and I want a damage report filed for his personal items, including his notebook." "Yes, sir. Right away." Sarah, grateful for the clear instructions, hurried to retrieve the kit. Marcus then turned his attention to Brenda and Richard Reynolds. Brenda was white as a sheet, her hands clasped in front of her, trembling. Richard looked like he was about to be physically ill. Brenda started, her voice a pathetic squeak. I didn't know. I had no idea he was I thought he was—" Marcus held up a single manicured hand. "Stop," he commanded. The word was not a request. "You thought he was what, Mrs. Reynolds?" Marcus asked, his voice lethally quiet. "A thug?" He quoted her word back to her. "You thought that because he is a young black man, he couldn't possibly belong in this cabin." "No, I mean, it was a misunderstanding. He was rude to me. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus called out, his eyes still locked on Brenda. "I heard you speak up. You're in 2G. Did you see what happened?" Mr. Henderson stood. "I did, Mr. Kingsley. I saw it all. That woman was abusive to your son from the moment she walked into the lounge. She was loud, she was prejudiced, and she was aggressive. Your son showed admirable restraint. She called him names, demanded he be moved, and when the flight attendant tried to intervene, she threw that drink right in his face. It was a deliberate, hateful act." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Marcus said. "Your testimony will be noted in the report." He's lying," Brenda shrieked, desperation making her reckless. They're all in it together." "Ma'am," Marcus said, "the first-class cabin of a 737 has a security camera. It's for cockpit security, but it captures the first 2 rows. I assure you, we will have a crystal-clear, high-definition recording of exactly what happened. We will see you, unprovoked, assault my son." Brenda's legs gave out. She physically slumped into her seat. One seal, her face a mask of utter ruin. "Richard," Richard Reynolds suddenly blurted, stepping forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. He was sweating profusely. "Mr. Kingsley, sir, my name is Richard Reynolds. I'm the CFO of Innovatech." Marcus looked at him. His expression didn't flicker. "I know who you are, Mr. Reynolds. I've been reviewing your company's bid for our new avionics software contract, a $300 million proposal." Richard nodded frantically, a desperate, sick hope dawning in his eyes. He thought this was a negotiation. Yes, sir. That's us. Look, this is a terrible mistake. My wife, Brenda, she's not well. She's under a lot of stress. This trip, it's for our anniversary. She mixes her medication with alcohol. She didn't know what she was doing. He was throwing his wife under the bus to save his deal. Brenda looked at her husband with wide, betrayed eyes. "Richard," Marcus watched this pathetic display with unadulterated contempt. "She mixes her medication, Mr. Reynolds? Is that the excuse you're going with? Not the blatant, vile racism we all heard? You stood there. You let her harass a child. You said nothing. You are not just passive, sir. You are complicit." "Please," Richard begged. "The contract. Don't let this personal matter affect a business relationship. We can compensate your son. Whatever he wants. A new sketchbook, a new suit, $10,000. 20. Elijah had just emerged from the lavatory, dressed in a soft, grey, Ascend-branded sweatsuit. He heard the offer. "I don't want your money," Elijah said, his voice clear and strong. "I want you to leave." Marcus put a proud hand on his son's shoulder. He looked past the Reynolds to the front of the cabin, where the captain, a stern-looking man named Miller, was standing with 2 uniformed Port Authority police officers. "Captain Miller," Marcus said, his voice ringing with authority. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Kingsley," the captain nodded. "I was briefed by Sarah. An assault on a passenger. It's unacceptable." "Indeed," Marcus said. He then pointed, a single definitive gesture at the couple. "Captain, these 2 passengers, Brenda and Richard Reynolds, will be exiting the aircraft now." The reality of the situation finally slammed into Brenda. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a misunderstanding she could smooth talk her way out of. This was the end. "No!" she shrieked, the sound high and animalistic. She gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white. "You can't! We're going to London. We have a cruise. It's non-refundable. You can't do this." The 2 Port Authority officers stepped forward. They were large men, and their expressions were bored. They had seen this kind of meltdown 1,000 times. "Ma'am, sir," the first officer said, his voice polite but unyielding. "You have been ordered to deplane. Please gather your belongings and come with us quietly." "I will not," Brenda yelled. "I paid for this seat. This is my seat. You'll have to drag me out." "We can certainly do that, ma'am," the officer said with a sigh. Richard Reynolds, meanwhile, was having a different kind of meltdown. His was one of pure financial terror. "Mr. Kingsley, Marcus, please," he begged, ignoring the officers and appealing directly to the man who held his company's future in his hands. "I apologize. I apologize profusely. Brenda, apologize. Tell him you're sorry." Brenda just sobbed. "I didn't know." "That is the problem," Marcus said, his voice like granite. "You didn't know he was my son, which means you felt you had permission to treat him this way. You felt you had the right to assault him because, in your eyes, he was nobody. A thug, a quota, someone who didn't belong." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping so only the Reynolds could hear him. "Let me be unequivocally clear. It would not matter if he was my son, or the son of a baggage handler, or a passenger who saved up for 10 years to buy this seat. Nobody is treated this way on my airline. Nobody is assaulted. Nobody is subjected to your pathetic, antiquated bigotry." He straightened up. "You are not just leaving this flight, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds. As of this moment, you are both banned, for life, from ever flying Ascend Airlines or any of our partner carriers again." Brenda let out a wail. "Your platinum status is revoked," Marcus continued, his voice ticking off the consequences like a death sentence. "Your accumulated 1.2 million flyer miles are forfeited, effective immediately." "My miles!" Brenda shrieked, as if that was the final injustice. "You can't take my miles. I earned those." "You earned this," Marcus corrected her. "You earned the right to be walked off this aircraft in front of all these people. You earned the right to be met at the gate by our legal team, who will be taking your statement for the civil suit we will be filing for assault on a minor." The mention of a lawsuit finally silenced Richard's begging. "Officers," Marcus said, "they are refusing to comply. Please remove them." The officers didn't hesitate. One grabbed Brenda's arm. "Ma'am, let's go." The moment he touched her, she became a whirlwind of flailing limbs and incoherent screaming. "Get your hands off me! I'm an American citizen! I have rights! Richard, do something! You're useless! You've always been useless!" She was now attacking her own husband, her carefully manicured nails clawing at his face. "This is your fault! You let this happen!" "Ma'am!" the officer shouted, grabbing her in a firm hold. The entire cabin watched in stunned, horrified silence as Brenda Reynolds, the entitled racist passenger from 1C, was physically hauled out of her seat and dragged, screaming and kicking, down the aisle. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she shrieked, a classic, empty threat. Richard Reynolds wasn't fighting. He was a broken man. He was ashen-faced, defeated. He knew with absolute certainty that his career was over. He had not only failed to secure the $300 million contract, he had just made a mortal enemy of one of the most powerful CEOs in the industry. He meekly gathered his phone and his briefcase. As he stood, he made one last, desperate attempt. He looked at Elijah, who was standing by his father, watching the scene with wide, shocked eyes. "Young man." "Son, I am sorry," Richard stammered. She's... Please." Elijah just looked at him. He didn't offer forgiveness. He didn't offer anything. He just watched him. Defeated, Richard Reynolds followed the officers, who were dragging his still screaming wife off the plane. As they disappeared up the jet bridge, a spontaneous, quiet applause broke out in the first-class cabin. Mr. Henderson raised his glass of water. "Good riddance." Marcus let out a long, slow breath. The tension in his shoulders dissipated. He turned to the rest of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice now calm and resonant. "My name is Marcus Kingsley. I am the CEO of this airline. I apologize sincerely for the delay and for the disturbing scene you just witnessed. We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment or assault of any kind. We will be underway as soon as the gate crew has removed the offender's luggage. Your flight attendants will be coming through with a complimentary round of champagne and to offer you any amenities you need. Thank you for your patience." He turned and sat down in 1B, the empty seat next to his son. The cabin door was finally sealed. The ordeal was over. The plane was quiet again. The flight attendants, led by a composed Sarah, moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, their professionalism a soothing balm on the raw nerves of the passengers. The engine spooled up with a reassuring whine. Marcus had his seatbelt on, but he was turned toward Elijah. He was no longer the CEO. He was just a dad. "Are you really okay?" he asked, his eyes searching his son's. Yeah, Elijah said, nodding. He let out a shaky breath. I'm still amped up. No one's ever done that before. Yelled, sure. Looked at me funny, all the time. But that. I know, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. I am so sorry, son. I'm sorry I was late. I'm sorry you were here alone to face that. It's not your fault, Dad. You handled it. That was kind of epic, not gonna lie. A small smile touched Elijah's lips. Banned for life. And you took her miles. Marcus chuckled, a low, warm sound. The miles. That was the part that really hurt her. But son, I want you to listen to me. You did the right thing. You were calm, you were respectful, you didn't sink to her level. You showed your character. I have never, ever been more proud of you. Elijah felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the orange juice. Thanks, Dad. As the plane began its long taxi to the runway, Sarah came by. She knelt by Marcus's seat. Mr. Kingsley, the Reynolds luggage has been removed, she reported quietly. However, in their haste, Mr. Reynolds left his briefcase behind. It was under his seat. She held up a sleek, black leather briefcase. Protocol says we hand it to the gate agents, Sarah said. But, given the circumstances, and what he said, I thought you might want to see it. Marcus looked at the briefcase. Innovatech. Richard Reynolds. He nodded slowly. Thank you, Sarah. You're right. Bring it here. She handed it to him. It was unlocked. Dad? Elijah asked, curious. Mr. Reynolds made a very interesting choice, son, Marcus said, clicking the latches. He chose to try and save a business deal while his wife was assaulting a child. He tried to use his company's potential relationship with mine as leverage. That was a mistake. He opened the briefcase. It was filled with standard files, a laptop, and a stack of bound presentations. The top one had a cover page. Ascend Airlines Avionics Proposal, Project Nightfall, Confidential. This, Marcus said, tapping the cover, is his $300 million bid, the one I've been reviewing for 6 weeks. So, what happens? Elijah asked. You're just not going to give it to him? It's not that simple, Marcus said, pulling out his phone as the plane waited in line for takeoff. We are a publicly traded company. I can't reject a bid out of personal spite, even if it's justified. There are shareholders and a board. I have to have a reason. But assaulting your son seems like a pretty good reason, Elijah muttered. It is, Marcus said, his thumb flying across the screen, typing an email. But we have to frame it correctly. He found the contact he was looking for, his chief legal officer. He began to type. 2. Legal team. Procurement board. Subject. Immediate rejection. Innovatech Solutions bid. Project Nightfall. Team effective immediately. The bid from Innovatech Solutions for the Project Nightfall avionics contract is to be rejected. The reason for rejection is a catastrophic failure of the character and fitness clause in our vendor partnership agreement. This evening, Innovatech's CFO, Mr. Richard Reynolds, while on Ascend property, was witness and accessory to an unprovoked, racially motivated assault on a fellow passenger. He not only failed to intervene, but he actively enabled the behavior and subsequently attempted to bribe the victim to silence the incident, all while leveraging his company's bid for Project Nightfall. His conduct, and that of his wife, demonstrates a profound lack of judgment and a moral misalignment that makes Innovatech an unacceptable partner for Ascend Airlines. We cannot, in good conscience, integrate a $300 million system into our fleet from a company whose senior leadership displays such volatile and despicable behavior. Their ethical framework is compromised. Pull the bid. Inform their board immediately. We will go with the runner-up, BAE Systems. I will be on the ground in London in 7 hours to sign the preliminary paperwork. Marcus Kingsley, CEO, Ascend Airlines. He hit send, just as the plane turned onto the runway and the engines roared to full power. There, Marcus said, switching his phone to airplane mode. It's done. Not only did they lose their vacation, their flight privileges, and their dignity, but Mr. Reynolds just cost his company its biggest contract of the decade. That, son, is what we call hard karma. Elijah watched his father, a new level of respect dawning. His dad wasn't just a powerful man, he was a good one. He used his power not just to punish, but to protect. As the 777 lifted off the runway, climbing steeply into the night sky over Queens, Elijah looked out the window. The city lights of New York spread out below them like a carpet of diamonds. He felt clean, he felt safe, and he felt light. The weight of the humiliation was gone, replaced by the thrum of the engines he loved, carrying him toward his future, with his father by his side. The 7-hour flight to London was, after the initial explosion, remarkably peaceful. Elijah, exhausted from the adrenaline, slept for most of the journey, his sketchbook open on his lap to a fresh, dry page. Marcus worked, his laptop glowing in the darkened cabin, his fingers typing with rapid precision. He was not just finalizing the BAE Systems contract, he was also dictating a company-wide memo. He was revising the passenger conduct policy. From now on, any act of harassment or assault based on race, gender, religion, or sexual orientation would result in an immediate, irreversible lifetime ban. No appeals. No exceptions. He was naming it the Elijah Kingsley Standard. When they landed at Heathrow, they were met at the gate not by security, but by the London station manager and the head of the Heathrow engineering team, a man named Simon. Mr. Kingsley, welcome to London, Simon said, shaking his hand warmly. And you must be Elijah. We are incredibly excited to have you with us this summer. We've got you set up on the new A350 engine diagnostics team, just like you requested. Elijah's eyes lit up. Seriously? The Rolls-Royce Trent XWB? That's incredible. Thank you, sir. Your father told us you were sharp, Simon said, smiling. Elijah, what happened on that flight? We all heard. I just want to say, on behalf of the entire London crew, you handled that with a dignity far beyond your years. We're proud to have you. As they walked through the terminal, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was an alert from a newswire. He opened it. A small smile played on his lips. Well, he said. What is it, Dad? Innovatech Solutions, Marcus said, showing Elijah the screen. Their stock is down 22% in pre-market trading. What? How? Their board received my email, Marcus explained. They also received a full copy of the incident report, including Mr. Henderson's witness statement and a link to the cabin security footage. They held an emergency meeting an hour ago. Richard Reynolds has been fired, for cause, effective immediately. They had to release a public statement explaining the termination and their withdrawal from our contract bid to stop the bleeding. It didn't work. Elijah read the headline. Innovatech CFO fired after racist incident on Ascend Airlines flight. $300 million contract lost. The karma wasn't just hard, it was catastrophic. Richard Reynolds had lost his flight. His wife had been arrested at JFK. Marcus's legal team had pressed charges. His 1.2 million miles were gone. His reputation was in ruins. He'd lost his multi-million-dollar job, and he was now the public face of a corporate scandal that was tanking his entire company. Brenda Reynolds was facing charges of assault, battery, and a federal charge of interference with a flight crew. Her non-refundable cruise was sailing without her. But the story wasn't over. As Marcus and Elijah cleared customs, a familiar face approached them. It was Mr. Henderson, the businessman from 2G. "Mr. Kingsley," Henderson said, holding out his hand. "Marcus, I just wanted to say again, your son is a fine young man. And the way you handled that, it was justice, pure and simple." "Thank you, Robert," Marcus said, shaking his hand. "Your support in the cabin was crucial. Thank you for speaking up when others wouldn't." "Nonsense. It was the only decent thing to do," Henderson said. He then smiled. "I also saw the news about Innovatech. Serves them right. You know, my company, Henderson Dynamics, we were the other runner-up for that avionics contract." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? We lost out to BAE, and fairly," Henderson said. "But I'm also on the board of directors for the Royal Atlantic Cruise Line." Elijah's eyes widened. "I happened to see the passenger manifest for the ship the Reynolds were supposed to be on," Henderson continued, a twinkle in his eye. "They're banned from my airline, too, and I've just had their non-refundable cruise tickets refunded. In full." Marcus looked confused. "You refunded them? After all that?" "Why?" "Oh, I didn't refund it to them," Henderson said with a grin. "I had the full amount of their booking, a 14-day transatlantic journey in the Queen's penthouse suite, transferred. It's now a charitable donation. The full sum has been given, in Brenda Reynolds' name, to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund." Marcus Kingsley stared at him for a beat. Then he threw back his head and laughed. It was a deep, genuine laugh of pure, unadulterated delight. "Robert," Marcus said, "I think we need to talk about that BAE contract. Maybe we can split the order." "I'd like that very much," Henderson smiled. Elijah stood there, watching these two powerful men shake hands, a partnership forged in an act of decency. He looked at the bustling London terminal, at the start of his new internship, at his father, who was not just a CEO, but a hero. He realized that the world wasn't defined by the Brendas, but by the Marcuses, the Saras, and the Hendersons. The hate was loud, but the justice, in the end, was louder. 6 weeks later, the sterile, cavernous expanse of the Ascend engineering hangar at Heathrow buzzed with focused activity. The air smelled of ozone, jet fuel, and hot metal. A massive Rolls-Royce Trent XWB engine, looking more like a piece of modern sculpture than a machine, was suspended in a diagnostic bay. Elijah Kingsley was not sketching it. He was plugged into it. Dressed in a navy blue Ascend engineering flight suit, his name stitched over the pocket, he was deep in concentration. A tablet in his left hand displayed real-time fuel flow data, while his right hand navigated a complex diagnostic interface on a rolling terminal. He wasn't a guest. He was part of the team. The incident on Flight 112 felt like it had happened to a different person. In the weeks since, Elijah had thrown himself into his work, and he had flourished. The other engineers, at first wary of the CEO's kid, now treated him as a valued colleague. He had earned their respect, not with his name, but with his brain. He had already identified a minor software inefficiency in the turbine's cooling cycle that would save the airline an estimated $500,000 a year in fuel. "He's a natural," Simon, the station manager, had told Marcus in a weekly update. "He doesn't just see the engine. He feels it." The sound of polite applause made Elijah look up. His father, Marcus Kingsley, was standing at the edge of the bay, clapping slowly, a proud smile on his face. He was in a sharp suit, but he'd swapped his dress shoes for a pair of steel-toed work boots, a sign of respect in his engineer's space. "I come here to see my son," Marcus said to Simon, who was beside him, and I find him reprogramming my $200 million asset. Should I be worried, Simon?" "Quite the opposite, sir," Simon grinned. "He's fixing the bits our $1 million contractors missed. Elijah, well done on that fuel flow report. It's already on its way to corporate." Elijah felt a flush of pride. "Thanks, Simon. Hey, Dad, what are you doing here?" "My meeting with Henderson Dynamics ended early. Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab dinner." Marcus walked over, his eyes scanning the massive engine. "This new partnership is working out beautifully. Robert Henderson is a good man." "Better than the last one," Elijah said quietly. Marcus nodded, his expression turning serious. "Speaking of which, I got the final update from the legal team this morning. The book is officially closed on the Reynolds case." Elijah stepped away from the terminal, giving his father his full attention. "What happened?" "Brenda took a plea deal to avoid a felony conviction," Marcus said, his voice low. "She pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and interference. She has to pay a $50,000 federal fine, serve 500 hours of community service, and this is the part I appreciate. She is on the federal no-fly list for 5 years. She can't even get on a puddle jumper to visit her sister. And Richard? Richard, Marcus said, is a ruined man. It wasn't just my email. Once the Innovatech board saw the cabin footage, the full, high-definition video of him trying to bribe you after his wife's assault, they fired him for cause, voiding his severance and his stock options. Then they turned around and filed a civil suit against him for gross negligence and reputational damage. He's unemployable. The industry won't touch him. Last I heard, they sold their home in Connecticut to pay the legal fees." "Wow," Elijah said. It wasn't triumphant. It was heavy. It was the full, crushing weight of karma. "And to add the final beautiful poetic sting," Marcus said, a small smile playing on his lips, "the NAACP Legal Defense Fund sent me a thank you note. The donation made in Brenda Reynolds' name was the largest they received that quarter. Her blind hatred is now funding lawyers for people she'd cross the street to avoid." Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder. "But the consequences weren't just for them, Elijah. They're for us, too." "Sarah, the flight attendant?" "Yeah. She's the new head of in-flight services for the entire transatlantic fleet. She's based here in London. She earned it. And the Elijah Kingsley standard is now officially printed on the back of every single boarding pass. Dignity, respect, zero tolerance. You didn't just endure, son. You changed the company." As he spoke, a loud, clattering voice rose from the other side of the hangar. "Are you deaf, kid? I told you to recalibrate the torque wrench, not stare at it. What are they hiring now, children?" It was an older mechanic, a man named Bill, known for his temper, looming over a new intern, a young man who looked barely 18. Elijah watched. He saw the new intern flinch, his face reddening. He saw the exact same pattern of humiliation, the same abuse of power. Before Marcus could even react, Elijah was moving. He walked calmly across the hangar floor, stepping between the mechanic and the intern. He didn't raise his voice. "Bill," Elijah said, his voice clear and steady. "He's following the checklist. I told him to double-check the settings before applying pressure. That's on me." Bill scoffed. "Oh, look who it is. The boy King. Stay out of this, Kingsley. This is the real world, not a first-class cabin." "This is the real world," Elijah said, meeting his gaze. "And in this hangar, we follow the standard. You don't get to harass him. Not on my watch." A silence fell over the hangar. Bill's face went purple. He raised a finger. You little..." "That's enough, Bill." Simon's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He had walked up silently. "Elijah is correct. That's your first and last warning. We don't do that here anymore. We are all on the same team. Apologize to the intern and get back to your station." Bill, looking from Simon to Marcus and back to Elijah, saw his career flash before his eyes. He deflated. "Yeah, right, sorry. Kid." He turned and walked away. Elijah turned to the new intern. "You good?" "Yeah, thanks," the intern stammered. Elijah just nodded. "Don't worry about Bill. Just focus on the work. You're doing fine." He walked back to his father, who was watching him with an expression of profound awe. "Like I said," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "you're the new standard, son. You're the new standard." That day, on Flight 112, Brenda Reynolds thought she was just putting a thug in his place. She thought her privilege was a shield, a weapon she could wield without consequence. But what she didn't know was that she wasn't just throwing a drink, she was throwing away her entire life. She learned that karma isn't just an idea. It's a bill that always comes due. In a matter of minutes, her racist tantrum cost her her vacation, her dignity, her husband's job, and a $300 million contract, ending her life of entitlement forever. This story is a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences and that prejudice has a price. The world is changing, and the people who refuse to change with it will be left behind, grounded, while the rest of us fly forward. What did you think of this incredible story of justice? If you were moved by this display of karma, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where karma delivers the final word.